live. Cate, I know you haven't watched too many episodes of the stream, but we used to have like a producer who did all of the beautiful intro graphics and coordination for us and knew how to had the timing just down perfect. And unfortunately, she went on to do more serious work than our little fun stream here. She's actually, last I checked, still at Red Hat, just, doing slightly more polished.
But at least you have a sloth. Like the sloth can be in charge.
The sloth is very helpful. He does a lot of good. But anyway, so Johnny and I always get excited whenever we get the intro correctly timed because sometimes we don't. Look, we're engineers, not producers.
Totally.
We're lost without Stephanie. Anyway, so hello, GitOpsians. Good, morning, afternoon, evening, wherever you are, to quote Chris Short there. As far as announcements go, we don't actually have any announcements. This is the last stream of the year. Coming back next year, we're going to have exciting topics like Project Hummingbird. And I forget off the top of my head, but of course I always post them on LinkedIn about 5 minutes before we go live. So, you'll find out about them eventually. But with me today to kind of close out the year is Cate. Cate wrote the book on engineering leadership. Which I totally intended to read before this stream and then did not. So
who reads a professional book in December? Like nobody. I hope you read some good novels instead.
I did. And I've been writing my own tech book. So I've been also very occupied with that. So I did read a couple good novels, mostly read a lot about AI operations. Actually, there was a really good blog post on like December 3rd, blog posts guidance issued by the FBI for AI with operational technology. So if you haven't seen that, go check that out. Fantastic guide. Some very interesting, the risk table's really good because the risk table identifies like things that you would think of like over-reliance, lack of explainability. But they also had some less obvious risks in there. I thought it was really, really like solid publication by the FBI on security and AI and operations of software. So check that out. So, Cate, besides the fact that you wrote the book, tell us more about yourself.
I live in Ireland. I work at DuckDuckGo. I am responsible for like the native apps engineering team. So Apple, macOS and iOS, Android, and Windows. I'm an advisor at a really cool company called Twill. They do referral-based hiring, basically. So, yeah, it's a really interesting platform. I really enjoy working with them.
Cool. And so when we were talking about this episode and kind of planning it, I think, like, you obviously you had a couple great topic ideas, but, like, the one I ended up kind of more so including in the title of the episode and where I personally hoped we would start is, like, Conway's Law. Why are humans the way we are? Why do we ship our org charts?
Yeah, I mean, that is like a fundamental question, right? So Conway's Law, for people who, I feel like you have it tattooed on yourself somewhere or like maybe burned in your psyche. But Conway's Law is organizations which design systems are constrained to produce designs which are copies of the communication structures of those organizations, which is like a really verbose way to say organizations ship the org chart.
It is, and I think I'm just traumatized by it. It is really
okay.
What it is.
Tell me about your trauma, Hillary.
Cate, the therapist. Well, so I have an interesting background because I've worked at companies that were literally 10 people big, and then I also work at Red Hat, which is part of IBM, which is like a few 100,000 people when you put us all together. Right? I don't actually know the numbers. It's a lot. So, yeah, why do we ship our org chart should be on a t-shirt. Christian, remind me to put that on a t-shirt when I eventually spin back up the joke t-shirt store that I probably will never do. That was the whole thing. So, especially in startups, I feel like it's easier to see because you are so in tune to the org chart and the communication structure that is where I saw it the most. And also, I think where I also started my career in quality engineering. So that was really like, oh, what are we doing? Why does this work?
A deep source of trauma, quality engineering. Yeah.
What was that?
A deep source of trauma, quality engineering. You see everything that goes wrong.
Yeah, everything that goes wrong. And so the frequent question that I ask and have continued to ask everywhere I've worked is, who is this for? because it sometimes doesn't feel like it's for the customers.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's one of the things about like working in an organization is like an organization exists to serve a purpose, a team exists to serve a purpose, but like individuals get really oriented around what is good for them as individuals and they forget other things.
Yeah, and I think that so, and I'm in reliability engineering now, right? Either way, quality engineering, reliability engineering, a lot of
Yeah.
my job or the job is to decompose systems and identify their faults. And so that's where I definitely see like, oh, interesting, like the interplay. I definitely see the Conway's law because I'm deconstructing the results of it.
Yeah.
So it's,
Yeah,
you know,
totally.
I don't think I can give like really concrete examples without like hurting feelings or potentially violating NDAs. But, you know, and I do think sometimes when people look at something, they go, oh, wow, this is over-engineered.
Yeah.
I don't think it's actually that it was over-engineered. I think it represented a more of that kind of a problem.
Interesting. Yeah, I mean, when I was thinking about Conway's law, I was thinking about like what's easy to do in an organization and what's hard to do in an organization, and how, you know, often in a leadership role, like you're basically like you're working across the rough edges, but trying not to get cut open, you know, and a little bit like picking your battles, like, okay, I can move this forward, you know, but this, like, is it worth it? And so much comes back to like you know, and like just any human has like finite energy, right?
Yeah.
Like my directs at least weekly hear me say something like that I'm not adding that problem to my stack. Like, not to say it's not a problem, but just like it's not going on the stack. Like priority wise it won't fit, time wise it won't fit. And you know, then I think we kind of end up in this you know, like if I say politics to you, tell me how you do. You want to vomit?
A little bit, but only because of the trauma. I will say, for me, a lot of times engineering leadership is navigating through identifying what is the least bad of the bad, so you can do that. Very rarely do we get to ship something that we consider good. I feel like we're often picking what's the least bad. And
I think that's a very SRE thing. Like, I don't think, I mean, and it's kind of from a client perspective, I think we do get to ship things that are good. But yeah, like, I think that's something I've heard before from SREs, you know, is they're like, and especially by the time it ends up with you, it's like so many decisions have been made and you're just like, oh.
Yeah. I like Christian points out here, over engineering could also be a result of tech debt. Absolutely. And I talk about this. Actually, this is something that I put into the platform engineering book I wrote last year. There's an entire chapter on tech debt. And one of the things that I talked about there, it's chapter 9, in case anybody would like a quick reference. One of the things I talked about there is tech debt is not only a result of bad decisions. It can just be a result of time. Sometimes you'd made the absolute best decision you could in the moment, and then the technology evolved, or things changed, or turns out there's a CVE with a really high score in there that you couldn't have known about at the moment, right?
Yeah.
These are the types of things, like tech debt is not necessarily something you do to yourself. And then especially a low
yeah, I mean, I think it's good if we do it to ourselves occasionally, because it does mean that we've like lived with a system long enough to understand it.
Yes.
You know, like this is my favorite interview question is, tell me about a technical decision that you would change in retrospect.
Oh yeah. I have one of those. That's a question I have had too.
Tell me. Yeah.
Okay. So for me, it was when I was working at my last job, there was a lot of JavaScript on the stack. And so JavaScript is asynchronous. And especially when you're working with server-side objects and stuff like that, that's not always great. So using JavaScript for a system that needed to be incredibly procedural, we resulted in a lot of like promise and pointers and this and all of these other things that if I had just said, look, I recognize we use mostly JavaScript at this company, but actually we should do this in a procedural language like Python. We probably could have done it faster, better, and more maintainable than what we ultimately ended up with. And so that was it. And I recognized late that I would have, if I had said that, every engineer I worked with would have accepted that. Like all of them would have been like, cool, yeah, makes sense. But I kind of just like, from not asking the right questions of the people I worked with, from not investigating more into the history of our technical decisions and why we were so reliant in so many places on JavaScript. Because of that, I just went with what was already present, thinking, well, everybody does JavaScript, it'll be more maintainable if it's JavaScript. And that was a very like naive and like retrospectively, how different syntactically is Python from anything? They all kind of look the same anymore. It would have been fine. And we would have had less time on dev and test and so forth, and been able to add more features quicker to this, this system that did a significant amount of our automated quality engineering that was all like server side and so forth driven. And we could have moved on to other things faster. So I would, if I could go back, I would undo that. I would pick a language that's intended for procedural work and not try to make it work in JavaScript just because everybody knew it.
And what did you like learn from that experience?
Ask questions sooner, ask more questions sooner, and identify what's really important when spinning up a greenfield project to the stakeholders.
I love it. You passed. Not that I'm interviewing you, but like this is why I love that question, because I do think like a good answer is kind of like it's a story, you know, and it's also you come in and like it sounds like you made like on the face of it like a pretty reasonable decision. You said like, okay, this is the stack we have. We use JavaScript. Seems fine. Can do everything in JavaScript. And then later you're like, oh no, you can do everything in JavaScript.
And it tries to do everything simultaneously.
Yep. Yeah, I have a like dark past as a functional programmer, and somebody once told me that I should like JavaScript more because it was like a more functional language. And I was just like, is that a feature or is it like the absence of features?
Yeah, that's a great question.
Anyway, yeah, I mean, I think JavaScript is a great language for the things that it's for. And, you know, like, I think you made a reasonable decision and then you're like, oh, this is not one of the things that JavaScript is for.
Yeah. Yeah, that's not what it was well suited for in the end. But, you know, it was done and it worked in the end. But was it maintainable in the end? No, not as much as it could have been.
Yeah. I can see how that would cut to the heart of an SRE.
The things we learn the hard way sometimes. Actually, you know what? That lesson at this point is now 10 years old. So I guess that puts some additional perspective into it.
But, you know, again, I think it's good to learn some things the hard way, right? Because it means you've lived with things. Like I'm always, there's another thing I think about when I'm like hiring leaders is like, if you lived with your mistakes long enough to like fix them yourselves.
Yeah. I am definitely, I was just having this conversation with somebody on my team, and it was one of those things again. The decision made was super reasonable at the time. And she's like, and I will be the first to admit it was a bad decision, but it literally seemed like it was the right decision when we were making it. And I do think that is the importance of recording your decisions, because so many times when I look through a system and I'm onboarding to a new system and I go through it, I'm like, okay, but why? Why did we do this way? And so if we record those decisions in like an architectural decision, an ADR, for example, record not just what the decision you took was, but the motivations behind it. That's really helpful. And I think that doing those documents real time is also very helpful as well, because one thing that I see a lot of people doing is solving for the problems you don't have yet instead of solving for the problems you do have. So premature optimization is a very real problem, because I have definitely been told by folks, oh no, we can't do that because it can't scale to, 10,000. And I'm like, does it need to? Like, how close to 10,000, management objects are we? Like, we're nowhere near that. We're not even at 1% of that. So why are we looking for that degree of scale?
I think for engineers, it's often just a habit to be like, oh, if it can't scale, it's not enough. But not everything we do needs to scale. And this is where, like, if you're not clear on what your requirements are, then people start making them up, you know? And this is where you know to kind of come back to like Conway's law is like product wants something, you know, they have a long-term vision and they ask for the thing that to them is the proximate step towards it. And engineering says, cool, builds that proximate step, but like hasn't asked the questions about what's going to be wanted long term. And then, you know, then you end up going down this path of like you built what people wanted in the short term, but not what they wanted in the long term. And maybe you've spent a bunch of time on things that people don't actually care about.
Yeah. I would say my greatest accomplishment in my role today was after I joined, I got the business unit to completely end milestones on projects because I asked where was the evidence that customers were asking for these things. And there was none. And so I said, you know, hey, like I hear you're asking for this. We could do this today with like almost no code changes. Does that satisfy what we're really going for instead of this other thing? And got the answer of yes. So I got them to get rid of like multi-year roadmaps down into either what already had been delivered, because it turns out nobody was actually asking for the rest of the roadmap, or into something that could be delivered immediately. And then we can take a data-driven decision on if we want the rest of that roadmap or to move into other phases of that roadmap based on customer adoption. And it actually became a joke in the engineering team when I joined. They started saying, oh, he'll know, because my starting position on everything was like, no, why do we need it? And that was partly just the sheer overburdened tech debt situation that I found the team in when I joined as a leader. And of course, so it gets what my business unit partners tell me is they always get so excited when I say yes, because it means that we're on to something.
Yeah. That's great. I love that. I mean, I think it's like there's two things there. Like one, in the absence of information, what do people come up with?
Yeah.
You know, I've been thinking lately about like how much people make up in the absence of like actual information. Like, what do you know? What do you not know? What's real? What's not? And then the other thing of just like being willing to say no, right? And just saying yes to everything, but like you don't deliver anything is just like a really terrible way to run a team.
Yeah. And I think that we had, I would say that like organizationally, if we ship our org chart in where I work, in the team I work, there's always challenges with that. But organizationally, the partnership we have from our product managers or what we call the business unit is so strong that I'm as we've developed this partnership and made it better over the couple of years I've been here, I have a very high degree of confidence that we're actually shipping what customers are asking for, because we're not throwing things over a wall. We're sitting down, having discussions, interrogating, asking questions, getting raw numbers of like, you know, it's always projections and so forth when you're saying, oh, what are we projecting this? How are we projecting this is going to do, like in terms of adoption rates and so forth? It's always an educated guess, but there's actual like sit down in a room, go over it together and try to like deliver on whatever data we do have. And where we don't have data, we are starting to see organizationally across everybody going, okay, we don't have data for that yet. Let's hold off if we can. Let's go back and get that data. Let's identify where we can find it and make better decisions. So I love the team I work with, both in the engineering side and the product side, for that. Is very, very, very lucky to have it.
Well, I mean, I believe you're lucky, but it also sounds like you're pretty intentional in kind of orienting yourself around like delivering value to the customer. And I think this is where, like, you know, coming back to my like, what's your reaction to politics, right? Like, I think when people talk about politics, like what they mean is they perceive somebody as operating in their own self-interest rather than some kind of or like rather than the interest of the business or the customer or the team. And this is what people call like politics, right?
Yeah.
Like in tech, when we talk about politics, like we don't really mean like politics in terms of like negotiation and getting things done. Like Nick Means has a great talk about this. Like we mean like, I don't like that person because I think they're self-interested.
Yeah. And I definitely have and do see that around. And I think it is I think it's possible I've been accused of the same, right? Because it's about perception. It's about perception. So I don't think any of us are immune.
Yeah, I mean, there are 100% people who are just like that, right?
Yeah.
Totally. But then there were also, I'm sure I've been accused of the same thing. And it is like, comes down to like the perception and the context of the decision, right? So like, if you make a decision, you have the complete context of that decision. If I make a decision, I have the complete context of that decision. But like, pretty much nobody looking at our decisions from the outside has all the context. Like deliberately not. Like, really, what's the point of having somebody in a leadership role if they like literally dump all the context over everybody? You know,
Yeah.
The whole point is to accelerate your team by being a functional abstraction.
Yes, 100%. But you know, and that gets into the nature of the game and communication and so forth. You had mentioned, I mean, we could talk about this generally forever, but I know you had also put some really other awesome things to go over in your ideas. So I did want to give you an opportunity to transition to something else, because it's already been 20 minutes and we can keep going.
Yeah, no, I mean, well, like one of the things like I think this kind of ties to politics and like kind of continues on a thread that makes sense is like, what is easy to accomplish in your organization? What is hard to accomplish, and what gets rewarded?
Yeah. Yeah.
Are we tapping into another deep well of trauma, or is this like
you
can't even talk about it?
I can talk about it generally, because I think what we see, and I this is not unique to any one place I've worked.
Mm-hmm.
The appearance of heroics gets rewarded.
I hate that. I absolutely hate that.
It is such a, and even if it's not intentionally rewarded, it is still rewarded. So I have seen leaders send out emails begging people, don't engage in heroics, don't give up your nights, don't go sleep deprived, don't work more than 40 hours. I see these emails coming out from leaders over many years and several organizations. And yet you always still have the people who do it. And it still gets, almost because it's like, well, even despite all the please don't do it, this person did do it and there was good results. So then they have to be rewarded, right? Then it has to be rewarded. So it's just one of those things where even if you intend deliberately to avoid it, you're going to reward it.
Interesting. Do you have to, I mean, I'm like trying to reflect on my own. I'm sure I've like rewarded people for heroics. I think more, like if somebody runs an incident, you know, like client engineers, we are not incident people, you know?
Yeah.
Like we were not built for emergencies. We were built to make things pretty. Like this is really our vibe. And so, yeah, like I think, you know, because I work on a web browser, we do end up having incidents, and like that's a place where I've definitely rewarded people for heroics. But does it have? Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I think you're right. Like it's organizationally, even if you try to run a sustainable organization, you're not going to get everything right all the time.
Yep.
And then, you know, either something's not going to happen, or somebody's going to pull some extra hours, be a hero, whatever. And like, you know, ultimately, like your teams probably get rewarded for delivering things, right? And in this scenario, only the hero delivers.
Yeah. So that one's really rough, because so heroics always get rewarded, even if it's not, you know, reasonable, or it's certainly not sustainable. And so that can make it difficult, because you can have people who are delivering very well, or very performant in terms of like what their work product and what they get done. But they're not a hero, right? They put in that strong work-life balance. And I've seen this more so secondhand. I feel like that's really, like, I'd like to really state I've seen this very secondhand. I have not seen it where I work today, but I have seen people be told, oh, well, you're not performing because you're not doing what so-and-so over here is doing. It's like, so-and-so's pulling 80 hours a week. I'm working the 40 that I'm like contractually obligated to work, and then I'm living my life. You're not going to get 80 hours of productivity from me within 40 hours. That's just not possible.
I just would question, like, if you got 80 hours of productivity from 80 hours of somebody's work, like, it's just like there's so much data that says that people are not actually effective at that time.
Yeah.
So then, the question I have is like, what are you evaluating that's like what I would call like performative work, and what's the actual work?
Yeah. My husband once worked with somebody that he strongly suspected set up a bunch of emails in advance to go out nights and weekends. Like
that's just exhausting. That just sounds exhausting as an activity. I was just like, I'm always like, I don't know, there's some kinds of behavior in the workplace, and I'm just like, wow, like, have you thought about getting a hobby?
Where do you find the time for this? Yeah. But he very strongly suspected that. So, like, in terms of what gets rewarded, I think heroics get rewarded, whether that's intentional or not. It just is. And I think there's a difference between going above and beyond and hero work, right? Because I feel like anybody and everybody can go above and beyond at times. I have definitely been known to do a pivot and go deal with something, and throw myself on the grenade to save the team. Like, I'll do it, but I'm not spending an extra 30 hours on it. I'll put in what I can put in during a normal workday and then figure out how to hand it off to somebody in a manner that means that it's least impactful to, especially working on a 24/7 team. It's a lot easier to do this. So I'm going to coordinate with my counterparts, other engineering leaders, other like managers that are in my peer group. I'm going to be coordinating that with them. Be like, I got this to this point. Here's what we did. Here's the history. Here's what we need to do next. Here's where like I think it should land. What do you think? Who can we find? And so it's more like that. And so that is, that can be considered going above and beyond. But I'm not going to do a hero thing. I'm not going to spend 16 hours solving this problem. I'm going to get it to a point where it's solvable and pass it, because I don't need, that is the glory. I don't need the glory of running the thing down until completion and working crazy hours and all that other stuff.
I guess like when you talk about like being a hero, I'm just like, well, like a hero exists to kind of fight a villain or whatever. And it's just like, I'm always just like, where did the villain come from? Was it your own poor planning?
Yeah, was it your own poor planning? For us, sometimes we're, as an SRE in a reliability organization, sometimes it's just mistakes. The fact that there is an uncomfortable amount of room for human error and humans are not perfect. A lot of times it comes from a race condition. Like, let's be honest here. Race condition, nil pointers, seen a couple kernel panics around the place. We get it all. And so sometimes we get very complex technical challenges.
Yeah.
And the villain is, we just don't know what's wrong. That's sometimes the villain is the mystery. And again, just because I picked it up and started working on it or happened to be on call or so forth, I can't burn myself out trying to solve the problem. It doesn't make me look better. And it sets the wrong example for younger people who are coming up in their career. It's not the type of culture I want to perpetuate.
Yeah, I would think then like it's less about like your personal behavior and more about like a good team should be able to do a handover.
Yeah.
Like if you're not, like you should be able to take a vacation or like a sick day, and somebody else should be able to pick up this thing. And if you are always being a hero, then like those things are not happening.
And sometimes the appearance of heroics can come from just not documenting what you've been doing. That is a real problem. And so, I've definitely had to pick up something from people who, were not around anymore for one reason or another. And you have to go through and just completely reverse engineer what they were doing because they left no valuable artifacts about it. Yeah. So I try to leave an artifact around my work product. Either there's a Jira where I've thrown some notes, there's a document where I have a rough like outline of things, maybe it's an email or a Slack message, whatever it is. If we're working an incident, I regularly am adding details to it to kind of help people understand if I fall off a bridge all of a sudden, what had I already done and where was I going with this?
Yeah,
if I have a theory, I record my theory. If I have a piece of evidence I don't know what to do with, but I think could be valuable, I copy and paste that in. Like whatever it is. So I think a lot of it is, the heroics can be kind of just from people playing things very close to the vest. And then they're the only person who could have fixed it. No, they're not the only person who could have fixed it because all they needed to do
made themselves the only person that could fix it.
Yeah.
I think I like the good scout rule of like leave things better than you found it, which sounds like is something you subscribe to.
Yes. I definitely try to subscribe to it. I was actually really delighted. I got a peer recognition email this week where they said that I do that, and I was like, I'm winning.
Yay, that's great. That's great. I wanted to
do. Left it better than I found it. So yeah. And then I thought the other question you asked was really interesting. Like, what's easy to ship in your organization and what's difficult to ship in your organization?
Well, what's easy to accomplish and what's hard to accomplish? So I was thinking about different, like shipping is always the big, like, is it hard? Like some organizations really biased to like shipping and iterating in production. And like, I feel like there are organizations that have just forgotten how to ship,
Yeah. There's so many things. And again, working on a team that's very operationally focused, my perspectives tend to be different. But I know that in like past places that I have worked, it's sometimes been an easier sell to be like, oh, look at the shiny thing that we can do, than to say, look at the pragmatic thing that we could like just knock out.
Oh, I mean, one of the things I think about in this is like it's so much easier to critique than it is to create. So if something's close to shipping, like, if people feel like incentivized to critique, then there'll just be a ton of critique about like why it's a bad idea to ship. It's the whole, like, it's the risk aversion thing, right? Like it's like that saying of like, no one ever got fired for buying IBM.
Yeah, that's true. And so that becomes a real. I definitely see people latch on to, ooh, we could do this new shiny thing, and it's like, yeah, we could do that new shiny thing, but that's like the size of an elephant. And if we just shore up what we have, maybe we don't love what we have, but if we just shore up what we have and critically examine it, we probably can achieve the improvements we're looking for with the new shiny thing. And not that we'll never make it to the new shiny thing. Maybe we will. Maybe that is a logical decision. But that true evaluation, I feel like people don't want to do it because they get, especially in engineering organizations, oh, but I could build this thing and I could get the recognition for building this thing.
Right.
And
again, it's the incentive again, right? Yeah. It's like, you don't get fired for buying IBM, but you don't get promoted for doing something boring. You get promoted for doing something interesting. Exactly. Or at least like there's often a perception of that. Like this is something I find fascinating about, what people think gets them promoted versus what actually does get them promoted.
Yes. Yeah. And actually, a lot of people, I mean, getting promoted is challenging.
Oh, in this market, for sure.
This market, most people I know get promotions by changing jobs.
That is, that was like just the way that it mostly happened for a long time. Yeah. And now we're not changing jobs as much. So
yeah. So, and I think this is causing a lot of companies. I know my again, the place my husband used to work, they really had to sit down and be like, what is our promotion process? How do we do this? How do we measure it? And I think a lot of times those processes bias toward one archetype. And it's like, that's, it can be very difficult for operational excellence to get promoted. Because if your job is, well, I made sure everything was boring and quiet.
Yeah.
That is so hard. It's so hard to demonstrate and prove and then tie back to like money. You have to go through a lot of hoops to tie that back into like revenue. And a lot of times promotions are driven by impact to revenue.
Yeah. I mean, you also don't have the counterfactuals there, right? Like if you have prevented 10 problems, like you don't have those 10 problems to be there. Like you can't like run an A/B test that says like, look, here's your organization if I wasn't here, and here's your organization with me.
Yeah. Maybe that's something AI can eventually figure out is to demonstrate, hey, here's how to model what would have been the potential hit to reputation and revenue if we hadn't identified these ahead of time and gotten them fixed and solved. Because it's like the last place I worked, we were releasing weekly.
Yeah.
And it was very boring. The releases went out. It's not that we released with no bugs. We just knew what the bugs were when we released and determined if they were acceptable because of like where they lived. So, it took us a while to get there, but like we were releasing weekly and it was boring.
That sounds great.
It was
I love boring.
But it's like, okay, like then it starts making the team that got everything there. Then there was a lot of, okay, well, you guys should be doing this. And it was like, I'm pretty sure this is probably why I got let go. But I was like, no, because there's not good. That's just like not a good idea. It's not the right thing to do.
Yeah,
we should be doing this other thing, which allows us to continue to be boring. Not.
I mean, boring is a lot more work, right? Like than it seems. Yeah. So other things I wrote down is like, how hard is it to change a process?
How big is the committee? Because now, let me tell you, like when I worked at startups at 10 people, changing a process was so easy. We sat down, we figured out what we wanted to try, we tried it, we adjusted, and that was part of how we got to being boring, was through iterative process changes. Now, in an organization of way more than 10 people with a lot of very strong opinions and a lot of varied backgrounds, a lot of valuable perspective, changing a process can take years.
Yeah. I think the spiciest thing I wrote down is like, how easy is it to feel responsible for something?
I mean, that's a good one. That is a very, very individual question.
I think it is individual, but I also think organizations can like work against it, like this is for me I have two problems with let's say three problems with micromanagement. One is it just doesn't work. Two is it just seems exhausting.
Yeah.
Like, but then the third problem with micromanagement is like, you're like stealing somebody's responsibility. Like if you micromanage somebody, they're not going to feel responsible for what they're doing. And, ultimately, like if you have a good team, then I believe that you can have this idea of collective responsibility where the team feels collectively responsible for stuff and they feel a responsibility to their teammates. So if they see something going by that's bad, they see an incident come up, like whatever, they're not like, oh, I'm doing my thing, somebody else will deal with it. Like that person is being kind of a shitty teammate, right? They're like, oh, this thing is happening, we need to deal with it. I saw it first, like I'm going to talk to people about it, but it's like my responsibility, like until it's done or until somebody else is like equipped to deal with it.
Yeah, we actually have processes around this as well. So being, again, an SRE organization, we always have people who are on call and it's a subset of the team, but they can get stuck or overwhelmed. Both these things happen. We have processes for them to say, I'm stuck, I'm overwhelmed. And you do see, I mean, and it happens in the time zones. And like, so you chunk down the team into time zones. It's a much smaller little group of people when we're time zone by time zone, right? I never, ever shy away from bragging about how good the team I'm on today is about jumping in and helping each other. Like the way we have each other's backs on this team is one of the best I've ever seen. So everybody that I work with, I can confidently say has a strong sense of responsibility for the overall quality of what we're working on and the overall quality of like our team collaboration and the health and well-being of each other. Because we can absolutely, you can be a principal engineer and safely say, I don't know what to do. I've never seen this before. And people be like, it could be an associate engineer. It literally doesn't matter. If they've seen it before, they'll jump and be like, I can help you. There's no criticism. There's no complaints. There is always like, hey, okay, here's how we can write this down and make our troubleshooting guide or, SOP better. I literally one time cornered Chris Wright, our CTO, to tell him about how great this team is because it's legitimately one of the most fantastic there for each other teams I've ever worked on in 15 years in the industry.
And that sounds like just like good. I mean, it just sounds like being like good teammates. Like everybody's a good teammate to each other. But I mean, it doesn't have to be an incident, right? It's also like
No.
code review. You
Yep.
know,
Code
how
review.
many developers are just like, oh, don't want to code review, want to write my own code, you
Yeah,
know?
we do not have that culture here either. We have a really great code review system. People are always looking for feedback. And it's an open source, everything we do is in the opens. It's everything we write is open source. We, actually just really had a really great conversation. We had a pull request come in from somebody not on our team, which love that. Thank you. But we rejected the pull request. And the reason I offered an additional conversation, which he did take me up on. The reason I rejected the pull request is it was to improve something that I'm in the middle of deprecating. This is not visible to you from the outside because the pull requests aren't up yet and so forth. But here's where we are in this deprecation part. Yeah, we could make it better, but like the process of making it better, we're so close to deprecating it. I'd rather not be distracted right now. If you think you really need to do this, let's have a conversation and do an evaluation. And he honestly was like, no, that's good for me. That's fine. That's a completely reasonable answer. I'll wait for that deprecation. Thanks for letting me know. But
That's great. That's great. I was thinking about like code review is like the moment where like my code becomes our code, and like this is the like collective responsibility thing. But yeah. But again, this like comes back to this like what's incentivized is what's rewarded piece of the conversation, right? Like, like as a leader, like you want to make sure that you incentivize people to be a good teammate.
Yeah.
But if the organization does not, you're always going to be working against that.
Yeah. And that's why I said, like I mentioned, we use peer rewards to send each other little notes and say thank you. So Red Hat uses a peer reward system. I think that's something a lot of larger organizations do. It can be harder in a smaller organization, but also sometimes easier because when you are working and your entire company is 10 people big, you do end up having, unless you're kind of a jerk, frankly, you do end up having a sense of personal accountability to everybody you work with because you see very directly the impact on their well-being if you're not. It is in that kind of, as you start getting, and the people you're working with become abstract, that is, I think, where it gets a little bit harder. And I think we see this. So I volunteer. I'm on the CNCF Code of Conduct Committee right now. And before that, I was on the Kubernetes Code of Conduct Committee right now. And I will say, by and large, people are not intentionally causing problems in an open source community. But we do see conflicts and problems. And a lot of that comes from just not really having any solid way of connecting sometimes because you're on the opposite sides of the world and you're speaking different languages and you're working off of different assumptions and you don't have insights into where the other person's coming from and what they're thinking. And, you feel like, there's especially in a CNCF landscape where there's strong governance. That strong governance is intended towards keeping things sustainable, but it can feel stifling and intimidating if you're not used to it and you don't have help, which is why they've got mentorship opportunities and all these other things. But you definitely see in open source some chafing, again, not because people don't care, but because they're just not even working with a remote. There's like almost no shared context except the code. That can be really tough.
Yeah, and I mean, so many open source maintainers complain about the kind of requests they get and what have you. And like, you see these ones that are like, they seem super grumpy, it's like, I'm like, I don't know. I think if I was maintaining an open source like component solo for 10 years, like I would also be like, don't bother me unless it meets my criteria.
Yeah. And so I think having an organizational structure like the CNCF can be very helpful to that. It's still imperfect. It's still growing and evolving and changing. People problems are hard. People problems are much harder than computer problems because the computer does what I tell it to. Now, if I told it to do the wrong thing, that's on me. Right? But if I tell a person to do something, unless like that command style is typically never okay. Like, especially to another adult, like that's not my child. I can't tell them go clean the room, right? No, that's not an appropriate interaction. So, one, you don't tell people what to do in a professional capacity unless it's like a very, very, very specific context. You need to have a conversation and negotiate action and so forth, because just handing out edicts is not how you build goodwill.
Yeah, I mean, that's true. Like, I really hate that description of like managing programmers as like herding cats. I'm like, it's like motivating highly trained raccoons. Like, they can do incredible things, but like, also, you better motivate them correctly, otherwise, you're going to get mass destruction.
Yeah, you might get the claws.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
It's.
Exactly.
I think a lot of people. A good engineer is curious, and I
Yeah,
think a
I agree
lot
with
of
that.
people get defensive when faced with that curiosity.
Mm,
So there is a skill to asking questions in the right way. And so when I talked earlier about saying, hey, like, why are we doing this? Like, I didn't just say,
mm,
why are we doing this to our product managers? I asked
mm,
it more appropriately for the conversation. But the heart of it was, why are we doing this? What are we seeking?
mhm, mhm,
But it will be things like, I get especially if I'm persnickety about anything on a pull request, it's the addition of a new dependency. What is
oh,
this?
yes.
Why is it here? What is our level of confidence in this dependency in terms of its ability to be maintained and continue to meet our security and compliance standards? I will ask you 5 million questions about why you brought in that dependency.
Mhm, mhm,
But I don't want to ask that in a way that just gives the person whose pull request I'm reviewing the assumption of, I think you're wrong for doing this, or we must
mhm,
rewrite this package ourselves. Sometimes we should be rewriting the packages ourselves. Sometimes we should be.
mhm,
But I'll usually kind of just state I see this, I see that you've added this, I recognize this is what it's for, here are my concerns. Can you tell me more? Right?
mhm,
Try to deliver it in a way that is demonstrating to them that I know they're coming at this with the absolute best intention to do this right. Because
mhm,
if I just say, no, don't bring in dependencies in, we actually,
mhm,
it's on us organizationally to have a checklist of say, okay, here's how we evaluate dependencies and know when to bring them in.
mhm.
And if we're not doing that, your room for criticism is kind of minor.
Yeah, I mean, this is like if you find yourself making a decision yourself, like thinking about, okay, why did I have to make this decision? Which comes back to the responsibility question. And like, how do I make it easier for other people to be able to make this decision going forward?
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And so that can be one of those. And we're in open source software and we're using open source software. And so sometimes the open source thing is just the right way or the best way. And also sometimes it's just the easiest way. But
Yeah, of
we've got
course.
other considerations about security, compliance, longevity. There was something in recently where I was like, hey, yeah, I see this package is still used around the place, but like it hasn't been updated in like 5 years. Another way
Yeah.
of solving this besides something that I'm concerned is not sustainable. Because I don't want
I
to
mean,
replace it.
are you getting a lot of AI generated pull requests?
Not yet. And we have to clearly market when they are.
Yeah.
So and the reason was it was brought in because some other thing was needed and it was a dependency in there. But when we talked about it, the person was like, no, you're right. Here's how I'm going to work around it. They worked around it.
Oh, okay. No, I've seen like open source maintainers like complaining about AI generated code like PRs. And I was finally vibe coding this week, which was like so exciting. But I was just like, oh my God, no one should do this for production software. Like,
Yeah. I've used it. You'll see, like, I'll go look at my GitHub history. You'll see very clearly where I've used GitHub the Copilot. I actually did do an entire proof of concept where I let Copilot just kind of do it. And I have it in my pull request. This is not production code. This is just to give you an idea of what I'm thinking the approach should look like. We need to rewrite this before we use it. Like that pull request is very clearly marked. But then there was some other thing where it was like, I didn't have quite enough deep contextual knowledge and I was just really strapped for time. So I made Copilot help me figure out why a test was failing and then worked with it to get that correct. But yeah, you can't just let it just go and just do what it's going to do. Like you do have to like read through each line of code and evaluate it. And it's like working.
I mean, you 100% can just let it go. But like, and then if you push that to production, you're going to have a really bad time.
Yeah, you're going to have a really bad time. So yeah, definitely you still have to peer review what you get the AI to do, and then you get other people to peer review what you had the AI do. And somebody asked me about this and I said, AI is only going to make you slightly faster at something you're already good at. if you're not
Yeah.
good at software engineering, it's probably not gonna make, it's not gonna be good. You need to know the things.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so I think we are seeing, in terms of just the open source landscape, like we're definitely seeing more AI generated pull requests. Some, I think it's still project to project, what's all being done, because there's always it's evolving. Some of the licensing questions and so on and so forth become really tricky because you don't know where it got the basis for the recommendations it made.
Yeah.
And so a lot of our pull requests I see are still like more automation created, like things like Dependabot, right? Hey,
Oh yeah, that's very useful.
That's a solid piece of automation. And I kind of say, like, where like simple automation can suit, that's the better place than just like AI for the sake of AI.
Yeah, totally. Did I have anything else? Not really. Was there anything else you wanted to talk about?
You did have one other thing, which we sort of talked about, like, which was like the
shared code.
Yeah, the shared code, and also the the maturity of the company impacting like what changes stick and what changes don't.
We've
touched on this as I've gone through what it was like at 10 people versus what it's like at a few dozen, thousand, 100,000. But I think that one is really kind of that one's a neat one.
I mean, I think this is like, if when change is easier, like change is also less likely to stick.
Yeah.
And so when change is harder, you're actually more likely to make a like sustaining change, but like the effort to do so feels really high. And so a lot of it's like, what time frame do you want this change to have impact on? Do you want this change to just exist whilst you're there, making sure that that change is true? Or do you want that change to outlive you? In which case, like maybe a harder process isn't the worst thing.
Yeah. It's definitely one of those, like we worked at a 10-person company. We made a lot of changes before we got to a process that sticks. That was, quick, regular changes may or may not be appropriate. If you change too much, too frequently, it may become a barrier to people just getting work done, because, and I definitely have seen this where it's like, oh, wait, what is this process anymore? How does this process work now? Because what the process is starts to become tribal knowledge instead of true process. That is the biggest challenge with trying to make too many changes too fast, is the context starts to not be shared.
Yeah, I mean, especially if it's a process you don't like look at very often. For sure.
This is something that I have experienced really recently, and it's not that the reason the process changed wasn't good. It was a good reason. Went through something, a couple weeks later needed to go back through the same process, completely different process. And it was like, wait, shoot, now I don't know how long this will take me because I have to go figure out this process end to end. It's all brand new. Did the reason it changed make perfect sense? Absolutely. But it actually still made it take longer when I went to go do it the second time because it had changed in between.
I mean, I think the other question is like, is that process your job, or is it like tangential to your job, right? Like, if the process related to my job changes, then I feel really like strongly about it. But I'll probably like adapt or die very quickly with it. But like, if the process related to like, I don't know, filing an expense report just gets way harder, I'm way more likely to just be like, I can't do this. It's so difficult,
Yeah, it was. Yeah,
because it's a chore versus like the actual work,
Yeah, it was more of the chore nature of things. And that gets, and it's like I could file an expense report for my cell phone, and I don't because it's so painful. I just don't, and I don't want it. You can't make me. You know what I mean? I'm choosing not to leverage a company benefit because the process is really painful and I don't want it. And but in this case, it was more of like a chore. So like I had to, even though I really didn't want to, but it was like, didn't I just do this? Why is it so different?
Yeah. No, I mean, I hate that kind of thing. I was like, I've been thinking a lot lately about the difference between like the work and all the rest of it,
Yeah.
and like the work is just like, it's what we ship, it's the product. And like obviously I have a leadership role, like my role is like enabling that,
Yeah.
like I don't really, nobody wants me to ship code anymore. But you just like, it's so easy to feel like, oh, like all I spent my time on was the stuff around the work, like none of it
Yeah.
actually helped anything get done, which
Yeah.
is like really depressing. And it is this like kind of fake productivity, it's like everybody thinks they were productive,
Yeah.
but like there's nothing like, for me, being productive is like something exists that didn't before, something is like done that wasn't before. And like that's, I mean, it's a very engineering definition of productivity, right? But yeah, and I think this is why like engineers, this is my like spicy, I guess we have 3 minutes, so I'll give you one of my spicy takes about engineers. Like engineers say that we hate process, but we don't. But when we love it, we call it culture.
Yes. Oh, I agree with that so 100%. That is a good spicy take. It's funny because one of the most productive things that I did recently was a 3-line code change. And that 3-line code change tagged a piece of data so that that piece of data could be categorized correctly. And it saved us probably 40 hours.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, the amount of time I spent figuring out that would be a meaningful change took longer than writing those 3 lines of code, but less than the 40 hours I saved us. It is a lot of times I feel like that is the job.
Yeah, but you also, you have to like have the time to think about it.
Yeah.
Right? Which is, I always feel like whenever I have time to think, I feel like vaguely guilty, like, oh, I should be doing something. And then I'll just like have some time to think and I'll like produce a document or I'll like realize something and I'm like, oh, like that was actually incredibly productive.
Yeah.
But I just like don't get it as much as I like would like to, because this like idea of like capitalism's fake productivity and constantly proving my value gets in my way.
Yeah, I will say one of the best things, my first manager at Red Hat, his name's Craig. He was the guy who hired me 5 years ago. And he told me, he said, taking a walk to have a think about the work problem is work. Go take a walk while you think about this. And the fact that
good manager,
great guy, great manager. The fact that kind of thing, he's like, if you go take a 20-minute power nap and you wake up with the solution, that was 20 minutes you worked. Right? That kind of attitude. I would say he's not unique. I'm going to brag on Red Hat for a minute. He's not unique in his perspective as far as Red Hat managers go. But that one is one thing. And I would say the same thing to anybody who asks me, go take a walk. If you're thinking about work during that 20-minute walk, then congratulations, you worked 20 minutes. If you take a nap and you wake up from your power nap and suddenly you know the solution because you let your brain just do the thing, congratulations, you worked 20 minutes. Like 20, like your work time does not need to be button chair. It really does not.
Yeah, very true. Well, thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, thank you for coming on. And just again, you came, you shared great perspective. We talked about engineering leadership, which is something we should probably do a little bit more of on a call or rather a chat that is about like process and GitOps and so forth. So just remind everybody again, what is your book that you wrote? What is it titled? Who published it? Where can we find it if we want to read it?
I used to keep a copy right here, but I've lost it. It's called The Engineering Leader. It's published by O'Reilly, and you can find me at Cate.blog.
Amazing. The Engineering Leader, published by O'Reilly. Thank you so much, Cate. It was really a pleasure.
Thanks.
Bye. And everybody else, have a happy new year. And until we see you next year, choose your technical debt wisely.